Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome. Thanks for watching. Today's topic is Resalest Book Review number 5. The first book today is Cannery Row by John Steinbeck, published in 1945. This is a short novel, pretty easy to read, set in California. It's in this town where there's a fish cannery. And this book is all about the workers who work in the cannery, and then they live on a street called Cannery Row. So it's about, Steinbeck liked to write about poor people and poor workers, and this is what it's all about. Their lives, their work in the cannery, and then this neighborhood where they live, their recreation, and what they do in their free time and so forth. And it's a pretty good book. It's pretty nice. It's a very entertaining story. John Steinbeck. The next book is Demian by Herman Hesse, written in 1919. Yeah, Herman Hesse, this amazing writer. This is a story about this character. I read it many years ago when I was obsessed with Herman Hesse and, read, one after another his books, and I found them very compelling, very entertaining, and really caught my attention. They're very lively and dramatic, good stories, and this is a very good book. Not pretty easy to read, also, really entertaining. Okay, the next book is Anne of Avonlea by Lucy Maud Montgomery, published in 1909. Now this is the second in the Anne of Green Gables books, and it's about Anne's life, I believe, as a teacher. She was a good student and worked hard in school, and she had ambition, and I think this is about her life. The books actually chronicle her entire life, really, until old age, and so she's getting older, and she's having her struggles as a teacher. This is it's not an easy job, especially when you're young. When you're a young teacher, and this is about her challenges as a teacher, and it's a wonderful story set in Prince Edward Island, Canada. More than 100 years ago, a simple time, and mostly, agricultural, a small town, and a simple life. A wonderful story, very easy to read, and characters with their challenges and so forth, and real nice book. Okay, the next book is Arrowsmith by Sinclair Lewis, published in 1925. Yeah, this is another one of Sinclair Lewis's novels, which really are timepieces, which, show the United States in the 1920s and all this change that was coming to our country and to the world. The automobile and the radio and movie theaters and, city life and, those were the times, the flappers. This was similar, to the same era as F. Scott Fitzgerald and the 1920s. Well, these were years of prosperity and optimism for the United States, although the First World War, it really cast a shadow, that the modern world was coming, but at the same time there were very troubling things that were coming along with it. Lots of change as people were leaving the farms and leaving small towns, moving to cities. Okay, the next book is The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway, published in 1952. This is a short novel, easy to read. And it's about this fisherman who went out and he's trying to catch a big fish and trying to make a living, and he catches an enormous fish, and sadly he can't get it in the boat, so he's like dragging it. He has to haul it. He ties it to the side of the boat and he's hauling it back toward land. But I believe sharks ended up eating most of it. But it's basically it's the story of this simple fisherman and his life, going out, the elements, the sky and the water, the ocean. This is set in Florida, I believe, and the wind and the waves and and so forth, and trying to catch fish, trying to make a living. Okay, the next book is Rabbit Redux by John Updike, published in 1971. This is the second of the 4 rabbit novels by Updike. He wrote them every 10 years, and this is about the continuation of this character's life as he grew older, and as he was living his life and moving through life, his career and his personal life, his family, and so forth. And you know, and it's a great period piece. You know, the United States in the late 1960s, which was really a crazy time. And so that's what this book's all about. And this character, Updike's fine writer, a wonderful writer. Okay, the next book is Rabbit is Rich, again by Updike, published in 1981. And this came out again 10 years later, and this character, you know, was an older man, you know, getting late 40s, 50s, and so, you know, as the title indicates, he had done well financially. He'd made good money, and you know, he had a nice home, and you know, the good things in life, restaurants and vacations, and the things money can buy, and you know, this was, you know, prosperity, the prosperity of the United States, and again, the times, you know, as our country changed into the 70s, into the late 1970s. So it's very good. The next book is Rabbit at Rest, again by Updike, came out in 1990, and this is the character at the end of his life when he was an old man, you know, and the challenges of old age and retirement and, you know, playing golf and trying to figure out what to do with his life, and health problems, you know, which are a major part of getting older. And this is the end. So if you read the 4 books, you go through this character's life from the time he's a young man, you know, getting started in the world, to this book where he's an old man and facing the challenges of life and friends dying and so forth, and trying to figure out what to do with himself, and facing, you know, the end of his life and death itself. Okay, the next book is The Iliad by Homer, published in 762 BC. This is an amazing book. It's a classic, and it's the story of the Trojan War. Supposedly the most beautiful woman in the world named Helen, who was kidnapped by the Trojans, and then the Mycenaeans, you know, were very upset, so they went to war. They attacked Troy. And it's about the siege of Troy. This is ancient Greece. And you have these wonderful characters, Achilles and Hector and Agamemnon and Odysseus. And, you know, I really liked Hector, you know, because he was this very noble soldier, noble hero, very noble, good guy. And he dies in the book. You feel bad about the death of Hector. You know, there were many Latin American baseball players named Hector, and it comes from this book. And then, you know, and of course, at the end, they finally decide to build a large horse out of, you know, a wooden horse that's hollow. And they say they offer it as a gift, you know, that they want to have peace with the Trojans. And so this is where you get the expression, a Trojan horse. But what they've done is, you know, and they're indicating they want peace, they're going to leave, and then this is their gift, and then, but there are soldiers inside. And so it's a trick. And they get inside, and so the Trojans accept this gift. They don't realize what's going on, and it works. And then it leads to the defeat of Troy. And then the other famous scene is Achilles, who he gets shot in his ankle, you know, by what we call this is where the Achilles tendon comes in, which you really need to walk with, and this really disables him. It's his weakness, getting shot in the Achilles tendon. Anyway, this is a very good book from ancient Greece. And then the sequel is The Odyssey, again by Homer, which actually came out 12 years later in 750 BC. And this is the story of Odysseus going home and after the Trojan War. And it's a long trip, and he has a tough time making it. You know, he's navigating. He's on a ship in the ocean, and they have all these adventures. They get a couple places they end up staying, and they become like the Lotus Eaters, this one place, and you know, they face all these challenges. And one place where they lose their memory. It's really nice, and then I think it's Penelope, who's the wife of Odysseus, patiently waiting, and they finally make it home after. And you know, we get the expression, an odyssey is like a long voyage, and that's what this book is all about. This long trip home that these Greek soldiers made after the Trojan War. Okay, the next book is Moby Dick by Herman Melville, published in 1851. This is a classic. It's very long, and when I decided to read, I thought, oh, this is a great adventure against the ocean, these whale hunters and so forth. It's a tough book to read. I really had trouble with it. There's this Captain Ahab, who is the main character, who's obsessed with catching this whale. And according to my sister, we in high school we had a teacher named Betty Grattar who was thought, Melville talks about the whiteness of a whale, and she thought that was really a wonderful thing. And there's a funny anecdote from the movie Major League, where this baseball player, he he's trying to make up with his girlfriend, and they apparently had broken up, and she's working in the Cleveland Public Library, and he comes in and he's trying to apologize to her, for things he had done wrong, and he's an athlete, not very cultured, and she likes to read books. She's working in the library, and he finally says, "Well, okay, I'm sorry, I never read Moby Dick. Fine, I'll read it. Where's the whale section, of the library?" So it's a funny story. So anyway, that's Moby Dick, a very classic novel, very well known. Pretty tough reading, I'd have to say. Okay, the next book is The Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, published in 1899. Now, this is a fairly short book. It's amazing. Conrad was Polish, and he wrote this in English. And it's a tough book to read. This is about the Belgian Congo. Belgium had this huge colony in Central Africa, centered on the Congo River, and they were really very cruel and terrible what they did to the poor Belgian people, and they were trying to get ivory, from and eventually ivory and rubber, and they enslaved. It was horrible what they did to these African people, and so this is what this book is about. The greed of these Belgian people. King Leopold, who's the king of Belgium, and it's all about this terrible thing that was going on in Africa. So this book really kind of pointed out that what was going on, because the Belgians, King Leopold, tried to hide what was going on, and supposedly the movie Apocalypse Now is supposed to be based on this book, although it's set in the Vietnam War. The Heart of Darkness, and this real cruelty that was inflicted, terrible. Millions were killed by the Belgians in the Congo, and it's a horrible crime. And it's good to and so he was kind of telling people what was going on. They didn't know. It was a secret. People didn't know. Okay, the next book is The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain, published in 1884. Yeah, this is a real classic American novel. It's not too long, and it's not too hard. It kind of has some humor, and it's about the United States in slavery days. It came out later, but there's this Huck Finn is this young guy. He's maybe 14, 15, and he's a funny guy, and he has this adventure with this slave named Jim, and on the Mississippi River, and that's what it's all about. It's a Mississippi River adventure, and they're trying to make it to Cairo, Illinois, because that was a free state, and they want to get there so Jim could be free, and that was part of the purpose of this trip. That Huck was trying to help Jim escape to freedom. And there's a lot of humor. A lot of jokes, and it's America. Again, it's a timepiece, and it's fairly easy to read, and it gives you a sense of the United States in the 1800s. And there's one funny and all kinds of things are going on, different encounters with other people, other boats on the river, and of course Huck had run away. He was still a minor, and then one time they were out, and it was very foggy, and they were kind of worried about who was out there. And then they heard a voice in the fog that said, "Dern the dern fog," and it was kind of funny, and it was a funny anecdote. It's a nice book, really nice. Okay, the next book is The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Came out in 1876. Yeah, this is similar, although not as well known. Came out earlier, and this character was a friend of Huck Finn. And same thing, the United States, and really talk about a period piece, when really Well, the Industrial Revolution was going on, but, and railroads were becoming popular, and steamboats, of course, on the Mississippi River, and, America was a much simpler country back then, although definitely changing, because railroads were coming, and that brought tremendous changes, and telegrams, and so telegraphs, and so forth. So, it's Mark Twain was a funny. He was a comedian. He liked to make jokes in his writing. Okay. The next book is Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe, published in 1852. And this was a very powerful book, had tremendous effect on our country, and it came out as the slavery debate was becoming more pronounced. And our country was headed towards civil war, because slavery was such a divisive issue. There was a growing opposition to slavery in the North. It was growing stronger and stronger, and in the South, they were really also, digging their heels in, trying to defend slavery. They didn't want to end slavery, or at least many of them didn't, and the powers that be. And this book illustrates really how terrible slavery was. And it has the famous character Uncle Tom. Now they kind of use Uncle Tom as an insult. African Americans, if you're an Uncle Tom, you're overly submissive or whatever. But actually, this character was very heroic. He was a slave, but he was trying to make the most of it, and he was a very good man, and it's too bad that it became an insult calling someone Uncle Tom, because he was a very noble character, and this book had a profound effect on strengthening opposition to slavery in the United States. In fact, when Abraham Lincoln met Harriet Beecher Stowe, he said, "Oh, so you're the young lady that started the Civil War," because this book was, folks in the South who were pro-slavery. They were very upset about this, the depictions in this book, so this book is a famous book in history. Had a very strong political implications. Okay, the next book is Look Homeward, Angel by Thomas Wolfe. Came out in 1929. This Thomas Wolfe we talked about earlier. He's a very talented fellow. And he was like a mad genius, incredible author, and very, very talented, super smart, and this same theme, that we go through life, and everyone, well, especially in the old days, they'd come from a small town, and then they'd want to go off and see the world, but there's sort of we feel compelled to go home to our hometown. That's what I did. Here I'm in Rocky River, Ohio, where I grew up, and after many years overseas. And so I highly recommend Thomas Wolfe and his writing. It's not easy, but you have to kind of slow down, because it's really something. He was so incredibly talented, an amazing author. The next book is The Little Prince by Anton de Saint-Exupery, published in 1943. This is a very short book, very nice book. I can't remember much about it, except it was nice, and it was short and easy to read, and a nice story, a real nice story, and a lot of people like it. It's well known, and it's nice to have a short book to read, because I know that's how I am. I like to finish books. It's nice to read a book, get over and finish it, and get over and move on to the next book. And you can do that with this one, because it's very short. Unlike stuff like James Michener, he wrote sometimes these 1,000-page books. You think, oh my God, I'm gonna spend. It's gonna take me months to finish it. So The Little Prince, fine book, very nice book, easy to read. Okay, the next book is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Came out in 1847. Yeah, and this is set in England, and in this sort of a remote area, and you have these two famous characters, Heathcliff and Cathy, famous lovers. Heathcliff's the guy, and Cathy, and it's kind of a troubling book. They had this very stormy romance and relationship, and it wasn't that sweet, and and then you have their problems in their relationship, and then you have the elements where they're living in this remote, kind of very windy and rocky and gloomy area, and the weather is very harsh, and then these two characters are having their very dramatic relationship where they're trying, they get along, but they have a lot of trouble getting along. And in fact, there was a song by Yoko Ono, John Lennon's wife, who she mentions Heathcliff and Cathy, like Romeo and Juliet, and David and Bathsheba, and so forth. Some of these famous lovers from history. Okay, the next book is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, published in 1869. I made a joke and I told my father years ago that they came up with a new title, a more modern title for Little Women called Small Broads, and he thought that was very funny. I hope I don't offend anyone with that with that reference. But anyway, this is a fine book, wonderful book. It's about these 4 girls in the United States during the Civil War. Their father has gone off to war, and so they're at home with their mother. And the oldest is very responsible and mature and so forth, and the second one is Jo. She's very spirited and outgoing, and very energetic and lively. And then the next one is there's a sickly one who's kind of passive and quiet and depressed. And then the youngest is Amy, who's kind of spoiled, also kind of like Jo, very very outgoing and energetic and lively. And then they have a neighbor boy named whose name is Lawrence, whom they call Laurie, and he comes over. He's sort of a big part of the story. So it's all about their lives and growing up, and just dealing with life. And there's a nice scene where they have their Christmas. They've been looking forward to their Christmas dinner, and they're so happy about that. And then the mother, it says, well, we can eat this food, or we can take it to the orphanage, and so those poor orphans who have such a drab, tough life, and they look at each other and they have a strong sense of doing what's right. So they do. They take the whole. They don't eat anything. They take it to the orphanage, and then they just have a plain meal, their regular meal. But they're so happy. They said it was the best. They say it's the best Christmas ever. They have the joy of giving. The joy of giving, and it's wonderful. So this book has very positive morals. It teaches lessons. It's good. It's positive. It teaches right things, and and then the oldest sister, I think she gets married and has she talks about her. She's a young wife, and then the younger, the one who was sickly, she died. So this is really tough. So it gets into death. That's tough, losing a sibling. And then I think the father finally comes home near the end from the Civil War. Wonderful book, Little Women. Okay, the next book is Helter Skelter by Vincent Bugliosi and Kurt Gentry, published in 1974. This is a book about Charles Manson and that crazy guy and this little cult that he formed about himself. It was crazy. This is some of these young people were really going crazy back then. He led them into killing people. I think Sharon Tate, who was an actress. So they committed several murders, and and they were taking drugs, and there was sexual promiscuity, and he just died recently, Charles Manson, and it comes from the title comes from the album by the Beatles, Helter Skelter, which apparently Charles Manson would listen to, as he was just a crazy guy who got carried away, lost touch with reality, and he was very charismatic and attracted to himself a number of young people in their late teens and early 20s, and who basically believed in him and whatever he said. So he started this killing rampage, and it was terrible what they did, and they just really lost their way. It was a very troubling episode, Charles Manson. And supposedly he was starting to, he saw himself as some type of revolutionary, starting a revolution. But it was very, very unfortunate, very tragic what he did. And then these young people who really, I'm sure it really, had damaged their lives, it was very, very hard on them, that they got mixed up in this. It was a cult. Okay, the next book is From Cobb to Catfish by John Kunster, published in 1975. And this is a baseball book about the history of baseball, as the title indicates, from Ty Cobb to Catfish Hunter, who was the star baseball player in 1975. And it's I think I subscribed to Baseball Digest, and I got this through a promotion. There has it has the so it's obviously it's doesn't have anything after that, and has a picture of Ray Fosse on the cover and Catfish Hunter and I think Andy Messersmith, and so the baseball players during those between Cobb and Catfish. That would be Babe Ruth and Joe DiMaggio and Mickey Mantle and so forth, and the New York Yankees and so forth during those years from the early part of the 20th century into the mid-70s. Okay, the next book is Whistle by James Jones, published in 1978. And this is the third in a trilogy. The first is From Here to Eternity, and the second is The Thin Red Line, and then you have this Whistle. And they're all about the Second World War in the Pacific. The first one is in Hawaii that has, from the movie, a famous scene, Burt Lancaster, on the beach, kissing a young lady, and a romantic scene. And then, anyway, Whistle is about guys who are in a military hospital who've been wounded, and the title comes, the nurse tells the men, if you need anything, just whistle. So that's where it comes from. So it's about, men who, it's a very well-written book. James Jones was a fine author. It's about, about war, men who'd been wounded and really traumatized by these horrendous things they'd been through in the Second World War in the Pacific, fighting the Japanese, in the Philippines, and a lot of it was, in the Solomon Islands and so forth. John F. Kennedy was over there. So Whistle is the third in the trilogy. I read them in reverse order, and I never read the first book. Okay, the next book is The Big War by Anton Myrer, published in 1957. And Anton Myrer is I think he's kind of a forgotten author. He was good. He could write, and he tended to write. Yeah, he was writing about the Second World War and soldiers, and this book is about the Second World War, The Big War. Very well written. If you're interested in learning about the Second World War and what it was like, and I think he was a fine author. I read a number of his books and really enjoyed them. He could write very well and not too tough. Okay, the next book is Once an Eagle by Anton Myrer, came out in 1968. And again, this is sort of a military book, and it deals with guys in the military from the Second World War to the Vietnam War. And so that whole psyche of fighting men, and what it takes and what they go through and all the preparation and how tough it is and the challenges and their relationships with each other, and their personal lives. And so that's what it's all about. And again, he's a fine writer, Anton Myrer. Okay, the next book is For the Term of His Natural Life by Marcus Clarke, published in 1874. This is a wonderful book. It's about Australia, and it's about the convicts. See, a lot of it was sent to me by a friend of mine in Australia, and these guys. There were a lot of England wanted to empty its prisons. They sent a lot of convicts to Australia, and many, a number of Australians today are, their ancestors came from England as they were prisoners, and So they're trying to get rid of these, they're trying to get rid of them. So they shipped them to Australia. I think some of them were shipped to Georgia in the U.S. and the French shipped some to South America, to Guyana. So this is the story of this guy's life and how he was a criminal in England and had been, they said, well, you're going to be sent to Australia. That's what they did. These convicts, and it's about his life, his tough life in Australia. And, so if you're an Australian, this is, the history of Australia, of so many of their ancestors. And now we get to my book diary. One of the best things I ever did in 1994, I started a book diary, and I've kept it up till now. And I read more than 1,400 books. And the first book the next book, which comes from my book diary, is called Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, published in 1947. And this copy, I came home to visit. This was my older sister Pamela, who had died. This was her copy, and so I thought I'll read Pam's copy. And this was high school reading, and so it's similar to Richard Wright, and and again it's the same era, and the life of African Americans back in the 40s and what they were going through. And again, this guy gets involved with the Communist Party, and this sort of exposes how inhuman they were. And it's a very popular book, and to show good history, to show what it was like for African Americans back at that time. And we are out of time. Thanks for watching. See you next time.